I'm Jack Knott. I'm the Dean of the USC Saul Price School of Public Policy. Good morning to all of you on this beautiful Southern California morning. I was talking to somebody earlier today from the East Coast and made them feel a little jealous, as I always do. But I'm really pleased to welcome you to the Breaking and Entering Women of the LAPD video screening and panel discussion. We're going to recognize 3 groundbreaking women and their accomplishments in general because they're just really impressive as individuals, but also in their furtherance of changing the culture of law enforcement in Los Angeles in particular. And this is an issue that as a school we are really dedicated to. Every year we have a Dean Speaker Series, and one of those is focused on women in leadership in different roles. And so I'm really pleased that this is the theme for today as well. And I'd like to start by thanking the Price School's Safe Communities Institute, the USC Department of Public Safety, and the Los Angeles Women's Police Officers and Associates for really all the work they've done in support in putting this event together. So could we give them a round of applause as well? And I'm also extremely grateful for the partnership that we've had with the Los Angeles Police Department over many, many years. It's been an integral part of our school over the decades, both in training and working in the community, education, and so on. And so please, a round of applause for that partnership and for the LAPD. And most importantly, I want to thank all of you here today for your service, both here locally and to the nation. Public service is something that we strongly believe in as a school, and we want to promote that as a society. Sometimes it gets lost in all the politics and controversy and polarization, but it's really dedicated public servants in volunteer and other ways that really make this country great. And so I want to thank you for your dedication, especially to the safety and security of our communities, and that contribution really cannot be overstated. So thank you all for that very much as well. So the first police department in the United States was established in New York City in 1844. And then many cities across the country adopted that model following New York City. And for better or for worse, they used the model that was adopted in New York City, and that model was borrowed from London, from the Metropolitan Police in London. And like the Metropolitan Police, American police was kind of organized in a quasi-military command structure. And that did come from the Metropolitan Police. Their main task was the prevention of crime and disorder, accompanied by a number of other services as well. But there were no detectives, and there were no women. In 1972, Congress passed an amendment to the Civil Rights Act, which originally was passed in 1964, prohibiting state and local government from discriminating on the basis of gender. And police departments, for the first time, were required to hire women on an equal basis with men, starting in 1972. That's not that long ago when you think about it. So since that time, especially in LA, the glass ceiling has broken, as illustrated by the increase in female officers hired, their diverse duty assignments, and also, just as important, their impressive promotions in really departments across the country, but especially in Los Angeles. The result, clearly, is that the agencies are much better situated to protect and serve our communities. So this month, Chief Moore hailed a drop in several key crime rates in LA during 2019, calling this one of the safest times in Los Angeles. And this is undoubtedly due to the noteworthy service and commitment and dedication of the 13,000 men and women serving in the LAPD. Most noteworthy, though, for this occasion is the fact that 18% of those officers are women, as compared to the national average of 12%. So the LAPD is actually doing better than the national average, but reflect on 12 and 18%. That's not good enough, right? We need to have a long ways to go. So that's why I say there's a crack in that glass ceiling. It may be broken, but it's not shattered, and that's what we need to do. So today we're going to learn about three very important pioneers. They exemplify profiles in courage, tenacity, and faith. They're representative of our officers, as Chief Moore recently noted, who continue to, quote, find and build partnerships to overcome some of the obstacles of the past that continue to be there, some of the ghosts of our history, and build new relationships that involve a safer Los Angeles, unquote. So I'm really honored to recognize their accomplishments today, and I'd like you to join me in congratulating all women who have broken through this glass ceiling, but especially the three people that are going to be talking today. So could we give them a round of applause? So with that, let's take a look at breaking and entering women of the LAPD.
I have the challenge and the arduous task of actually trying to introduce these three legendary pioneers and doing it in 5 minutes. That's the challenge. But before we do that, I would like to acknowledge and recognize the director of that outstanding piece, Eleanor Blake. And Eleanor is pursuing her master's in film and television production from right here at USC's School of Cinematic Arts. So again, another Trojan in the room and another alum potentially from this great university. So thank you for being here and thank you for producing this. This is the part where it gets difficult because one, I had heard her name for many years and admired her, but hoped for the chance to meet her. And I'll save her for last because she is truly a pioneer. But the other two are good friends of mine. And that's where the challenge is, because I could talk about both of them extensively for quite a while. But I will start with my partner. And for those that are not aware, she is now my assistant chief. She works and serves right here at the University of Southern California, Alma Burke. A little bit about Alma, and I'll make this very short, but she was born and raised in Santa Ana. She is a first-generation college graduate, first-generation Latina college graduate, and she was my classmate in the Executive Masters of Leadership program right here at USC. So we're both proud Price alums. So, but I did have the pleasure of actually being a part of her cohort. She began her career at LAPD in 1996. And in 2006, she was promoted to the rank of sergeant and assigned to Southeast Patrol, where she did some incredibly innovative work that built great relationships that helped reduce crime and also build relationships between the community, which had historically had very fractured relationships between the LAPD. Alma was a part of a very innovative program that will continue, Rockets in the Project, where basically it is a STEM program that allows for children living in the projects to design and build rockets successfully and launch them, and then also to learn about science. But it also gave them important lessons regarding the value of education. And Alma was spearheaded that program with another classmate from our EML program, who Frank was a part of that. But again, let me talk about her selection to our department, because when you look at something like this and you realize women have been deserving to be a part of this profession for quite some time. We went through a very exhaustive search, national search, and fortunately we were able to get Alma, who was right under our nose. 68 candidates applied for that position from across the country. Quite a few of them were chiefs. It was narrowed down from 68 to 34 to 16. And then lo and behold, I'm looking at the top 3, and there's my classmate. And thank you. Please applaud. Please applaud. But so there are no gifts. She scratched and clawed and prevailed, and I'm so fortunate, and our university is so fortunate to have you. So, Alma, thank you for being a part of this, and Steve, thank you.
Thank you.
And the other person, I didn't know you had such a great sense of humor, Jen, but that was incredible. Yeah, and your mom, what a pleasure to have you a part of this, and also for the gift of Jen. But Jennifer Grasso was born and raised in San Diego, and in 1995, she was hired by the LAPD, did her probationary year at Wilshire Division. She worked crash at Southwest. I also worked crash in South LA as well during my time at LAPD. In 2003, she was awarded the Newton Division Officer of the Year. And in 2008, she defied odds and was selected to attend the SWAT school, which is extremely difficult. And one of the things I know about Jen during that period, she actually was injured. I think she hurt her leg or broke her leg. And basically said, I will go through it again, and waved off the time that she did, and basically said, I will go through the full process again. So incredible feat. I do know that there were women that tried to become SWAT members before and were, despite their tenacity and effort, were not able to. And a lot of it had to do not so much with their abilities, but it had to do with the timing and the mentality at that time. But Jen prevailed, and in her tenure at SWAT, she was an operator, a crisis negotiator, a lead climber, which I have no idea what that is, and an EMT, and a tactical waterborne diver. Wow, impressive. But most importantly, as you can see through this film, she has an amazing spirit, and what a great representative for law enforcement in general. So, Jennifer Grasso. And Jen is also an alum of the Price School Executive Masters of Leadership Program. Now, this is the person we could talk about all day. When you talk about the history of LAPD, and I'll give you a little perspective. LAPD hired its first woman officer in 1910. Actually, it was the first female officer in American law enforcement with Alice Stebbins Wells. So when you think about the trajectory and the time period and the things that the length of time that it took for these progresses to be made, particularly when it came down to women even being allowed to work patrol assignments in the field, which was in the 80s. Hired its first African-American female officer, Georgia Ann Robinson, in 1916. Then in 1946, Josephine Soriano Collier became the first Latina to become a member of the Los Angeles Police Department. So when you start looking at it in the perspective of the years and the time and the struggles, monumental achievements when you look at the career of Helen Kidder. And Helen, her partner, was a mentor of mine. Peggy York, another legend. But Helen Kidder's career started in 1968 as a policewoman. For those that are not familiar with what that title was, basically, these women, I came on in 1984, they were still wearing skirts as a part of the uniform. That was the uniform, a skirt and the regulation top. But for the most part, they were not allowed to work patrol assignments until a piece of landmark legislation the Fanchon Blake decision that basically forced the Los Angeles Police Department to allow women to, one, be hired and to work the same assignments commensurate with their male counterparts. But as you saw in the film, her career and her service as a detective, along with Peggy York, that was the basis of Cagney and Lacey. The other thing that was quite incredible about her career, again, glass breaking, she was the first woman from the Los Angeles Police Department to be selected and chosen to go to the FBI National Academy. Very prestigious and quite an accomplishment. And as she was telling me, that caused quite a stir. And I'll let her talk about that. But without further ado, because I want you to enjoy it and learn from these three women, Helen Kidder. And the moderator for this panel will be the esteemed Dr. Earl Southard, my friend, Dr. Earl Southard.
Good morning. So I'm going to apologize for having a this is the best my voice has been since Monday. I had laryngitis for a couple days. I have the best colleague in the world here at USC to work with Jessie Red, and to give Jessie a round of applause. But she runs a tight ship. And I had 6 speaking events, podcasts, lectures to give in the last 2 days. And so it's hard sometimes. So I also want to thank Dean Knott. Dean Knott had to leave. He makes it extremely easy for Jessie and I to do what we do. It's great when you have a dean that supports you, and I never have to ask when I go in his office if I can do it. He just says, when is it going to happen? And I think there's a clone of him, because every time we have an event, he's always there and as supportive as he was this morning. I do want to recognize a couple people. We don't do this in a vacuum, and we're very lucky to have some people who support USC both in presence and financially. And I want to thank Mark and Laura Woodcoff, who are here today, and Jackie Applebaum, who helped sponsor this event. So please. So now we get to the good part, and this really is kind of family for me. I'm dating myself. When I started my career 40 years ago, and in the interest of full disclosure, I had Jen as a student, but this goes both ways. You know, the great part about this is that Jen and Alma are both alums, and because people like them are in my classes, Jen, in your class, I had 5 LAPD officers in class and 1 online, and as a result, 2 students in that class, when they got their master's degrees, are now at LAPD. So we're really happy about that. Kevin, on the other hand, was different. Alma's husband, Kevin, was a student of mine. We have a running gun battle between USC and Notre Dame football. So I went to Ireland and stood in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral in a USC varsity jacket and gave him the fight on sign and emailed him that picture. But you've all worked a variety of details, and in the interest of full disclosure, again, Helen and Alma, when I was given a choice between Vice and gangs, I went to gangs. But I'm going to ask you, what was your favorite assignment of all the assignments you've all worked throughout your careers? And I'll start with Helen.
I think my favorite assignment was working Pacific Patrol, which is Venice Division. And the first time I'd ever worked patrol, I was up in the front calling the roll. And I certainly learned a lot there, but it was the most gratifying experience of my career, I think, along with many other wonderful ones. But to look the guys, figuratively speaking, in the face every day with what they did and their willingness to do the job and to do it right was very, very gratifying to me. And I was very glad that I could help them along with what they were doing every night, that a lot of other people would never do.
So SWAT was an amazing assignment. I got to do some incredible things. I used to pinch myself regularly and literally say out loud, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. But in my new role as a supervisor, I just had no idea how gratifying it would be to be a mentor and a leader and somebody to send these young officers out every night and give them as much information as I can to make sure that they come back at the end of the shift. And to see them make great arrests or have wonderful interactions with the community, I have to say it's more gratifying than anything I've ever done. So the SWAT was my favorite. I would say being a field supervisor is the most gratifying thing I've ever done on the department.
Okay.
So I wholeheartedly agree with Jen. One of the assignments that I have to share with some of the folks in the room, my CSP family, Community Safety Partnership at Southeast, but I had worked every single assignment, and we can sit here and talk about each one of them, but gratifying was the one that was at Southeast and being in Watts, because when you come from a background where poverty and crime and just being able to walk to school safely is your number one priority, then being there meant so much more than any other assignment I could have ever been part of. And to Jen, and just to piggyback on hers, having the ability to lead and to provide kind of an insight every day in roll call and really give them some instrument that will help them survive that day was very, very critical. But more importantly, the wellness in their heart and being able to give back. So CSP is Southeast.
Excellent. So, times have changed, and again, I'm going through an interesting transition right now. My son is in the process for an agency, and we've had some conversations, and I just want to know, what's the most important thing a person should know who's considering law enforcement today, male or female, in your opinion?
It's going to be challenging, and you have to prepare yourself to create a balance in your life. And the reality of it is there are going to be things that you will see, that you will experience, that will sit in your heart, and you have to have the ability to let those things out and be able to have that support system. So you're going to be challenged every single day.
So the world we live in with social media and 24-hour news streaming, I think it's easy to think that all law enforcement officers are bad. And why would anybody want to join the ranks of a group of professionals that are constantly criticized? But what I can say is you have to be able to drown out that noise and know that every night that you go out there and you interact with a family or you solve a problem for somebody, that's a victory. And you know what? The public's not going to hear about it. They're not going to know about it because it doesn't sell advertisements. But really, that's what keeps us coming back and doing the work that we do every night and just having those small impacts, like that homeless guy in the film. I mean, that's the stuff that keeps me going. And so I try not to get caught up in all the stuff that I have no control over and just get caught up in the stuff that I do have control over and the influence and the impact I can make in the community.
I think everything that's been said is just incredibly right. But then another thing that I find with a lot of officers, no matter how much time they've got on the job or how many different experiences they've had, is the element of service. And you see it all the time and how they feel about what they're doing and coming to work every day. And then another thing that I think is important about the job is the variety of assignments that you have on the LAPD, particularly since it's a large department. And what I always used to say is if you have a short attention span, this is a perfect place for you to be. And just quickly, I had 12 different regular assignments, and I had 8 loans to different places, including the FBI. And then the number of schools that I got to go to, which was the FBI Academy. I became a bomb technician. I must have been out of my mind. But just a wide variety of assignments. And there's so many things to be done in the city that absolutely contribute to what you do every day to keep this place going. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't know, because all they see, for the most part, is what's on television, which is mostly patrol officers, but many, many other things to choose from.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit here, and Jen, I've got to give your mom credit, because with all due respect, the whole doctor, lawyer, my mom wanted me to be a doctor, and I left medical school to go to law enforcement. And she didn't talk to me for about 6 months. So I just want to ask you, looking back, the three of you, if you were going to start your careers over again, what would you do differently? And not in any one particular order.
So, of course, I now have the benefit of 24 and a half years of experience with the LAPD, so it'd kind of be cheating. But if I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't be afraid. I wouldn't listen to the naysayers, the negative voices telling you you can't do that, discouraging me. And yeah, I would do things very differently. Although I've always been a kind of a hard charger and a go-getter, I think early on in my career, you're trying so desperately to fit in and to be liked and accepted. And I think as a woman, you have to work extra hard. I've always said you have to do twice the work to get half the credit as a woman in law enforcement. I'm sure that's can be said about other male-dominated professions, but I wouldn't listen to the people that didn't have my best interests in mind.
May have gone for some of those duties even sooner? Those
Maybe,
units?
maybe. I think it all happened for a reason, the way that it did, but yeah, and that's the advice now that I give to young officers, male and female. You know, if you don't put in for the spot, somebody else is going to, so why not?
Good for you. Helma?
Thank you. One of the things I would definitely tell myself is that there are going to be a lot of roadblocks, but as a big boulder that's standing in front of you, learn that you're going to go around it or you're going to have some people help you push it. And I'm very proud to say that a lot of people helped me push that boulder. And so I'm appreciative of the people that have come along the way with me. And more importantly, telling yourself that, again, those whispers that you're going to hear, and you will hear lots of them, is don't listen to them. Listen to the one that's sitting in your heart and stay with that passion.
Oh, that's very well said. And I think that's absolutely right, is just to listen to your heart and don't keep your scope narrow. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot of opportunities. And if you do the job right, you will get recognized for what you're doing and you will get asked to take different assignments. And I think that even though you may only work one division, let's say, because of the kind of work that you do and the person that you are, you will get asked to do other things and opportunities will be there for you all the time.
So in every profession, mentors are absolutely critical. And unfortunately, you three broke some serious ground in all different areas. And I'm just wondering, did you have a mentor? And if you did, would you mind sharing who it is?
Well, now long retired Deputy Chief Ron Frankel. And some of you may know him, or maybe this is the first time you've ever heard his name. But I had a problem at one division that I worked, which is notorious in the history of LAPD for the way it treated women. But he recognized what I was doing and moved me out to the Valley. And I think that at different times I got asked to do different things, and a lot of mentors, former Chief Bernie Parks, and I think it all goes back to the kind of job that you do and the opportunities that are presented to you that you take advantage of. And you will be asked to do many, many things.
So early on in my career, you may have heard of Assistant Chief Beatrice Gramala. She was actually my supervisor when I was a field training officer in Hollywood. And let me tell you, having her locker next to mine really inspired me because there were times where there was a promotional exam or something was coming up, and I would tell her that I wasn't ready. And she would tell me, no, you are, and I'm here to tell you, you're not only ready, but you're capable. And that was really, really inspiring for me early on. Jim McDonald, when I was working in Southeast and South Bureau Homicide, he really took me under his wing and taught me some amazing things. And then my classmate, John Thomas, Chief Thomas, I would not be here, sitting here, if it wasn't for you. So thank you.
So I don't think I had a mentor in the traditional sense of somebody that, you know, took me under their wing and kind of helped me along. But I've had some very good interactions throughout my career where people gave me the encouragement. They said, those words that I needed to hear at critical points in my career. But I think even more so, I had a lot of bad experiences and negative interactions, and it was something that I was always mindful of. I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to treat people like that. And so I think they were kind of like competing forces, those positive voices, and then knowing that I was going to be better than maybe some people that weren't exactly leading by example. So, yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay. So let me ask you a little different question. Why do you think some women hesitate to consider law enforcement as a career profession?
I'm going to say that some women feel they're not capable, physically or mentally, and I've heard that several times. And when I've challenged them to say, you are capable, you are willing, and you have that heart, it just seems to give them that push.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
So I think probably one of the most obvious reasons is that law enforcement officers are killed on a daily basis in this country. And I think as women, the way that we're raised, the things that we're exposed to as children and as young women, I mean, that's not exactly something that we're going to gravitate towards. And then it's difficult. It's challenging being the only woman in the room. And there is this kind of testosterone-driven attitude in law enforcement, and sometimes, quite frankly, women don't want to put up with that. And I get it. But I think more and more, especially our department, we're very progressive, as you can tell by our numbers. I think we lead the nation in the number of female officers. So in the modern day era, I think there's a place for women in law enforcement. I think we use force a lot less than men do. And I think in general, our interactions tend to be somewhat less abrasive for the most part. So I would encourage anybody in this room that's considering law enforcement as a career option that there is a place for you, especially in the LAPD, maybe in USC Department of Public Safety. But yeah, I understand why women are not attracted to it, but we need women.
I think that all of us watch the 6 o'clock news or whatever it is, and what you see, what you read in the LA Times certainly is all the altercations, the shootings, the officers who die in the line of duty. But I think one thing that we used to do as recruiters was let women know the options that are available to them on the police department. It is not just working patrol. And there are myriads of things to do, particularly on a large department like this. And if, as I said, if you've got a short attention span, you can transfer, but many, many, many options that are available to you. And I think most women don't realize what's available to them and what they can do, where they can go, and where they can more than contribute sometimes. I personally could never have worked child abuse, ever. But there are women who do it and do it well, do it beautifully, and make a contribution to lives like we just can never understand. And if there are a lot of choices available to you other than working patrol.
You know, I just want to go back and reflect on something Jen mentioned. Whenever, particularly over the last 4 to 5 years, when we've seen some shootings that unfortunately may have usually involved unarmed African-American males and white police officers, I always ask the question of why is it that whenever that happens, it's not a female officer involved? And so you raise a very interesting point, because I had my share of female partners. They had more fights than I did in the field. And they took as many people to jail as I did in the field. And when it comes to use of force, it seems like that's not as much of a problem. And so I want to ask all three of you, what experience and skill sets are really necessary to have a successful career in policing today, and what kinds of things do you look for?
So I think the days of police officers telling somebody to do something and then making them do that something if they refuse to do it voluntarily, although at some point you might arrive at that, making somebody do something, we're kinder and gentler. And we used to say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but now I think that's the reality. There's an expectation now that we talk to people, we listen to people. The big word on the LAPD right now is de-escalate. And sometimes, and I'm going to give a shout out to women, because we don't necessarily default to force, to physical force. I certainly don't want to fight a man twice my size. I might take that little extra time to try again to be persuasive, to communicate, to have some sort of a breakthrough with this person, to encourage them. And oftentimes, as a young officer, I would say, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And I prefer that we do it the easy way. It'll be better for all of us involved. But eventually, you're going to jail. So I think as women, like I said, we tend to be, I would like to say, better communicators in a lot of respects. And because force isn't our go-to option all the time, although we can and we will, that's not necessarily the first thing we want to do. Now, I compare that to a 25-year-old male police officer who bench presses 325. That guy wants you to challenge him. He wants you to fight him. And most women on our job, we don't bench 325. I would like to say that I do, but I don't. And so, yeah, I tend to lean towards communicating, listening. Sometimes people just want to vent. They want to be heard. You know what? I get paid by the hour, so let's have at it.
So true.
Anyways.
You.
I don't know if I answered.
Good
your
old
question.
Jen. I absolutely 100% agree, but I will add to the self-awareness piece is when you walk into a room or you answer that radio call, assuring yourself that you are reading that room and that you're reading the individual, and the level of communication that you need to have with people is, and really adding the empathy piece is, you're seeing people on their worst day. It's their worst day, and we do get paid. I don't get paid by the hour anymore, but take your time. Really, as an officer and as a woman, you really have those skill sets, being a mother and a sister and everything else, but that's just really what adds to that level of police work. So,
I sometimes think that this is a skill which is learned. If you're fortunate to have a good partner who realizes that, or else you realize it. And my partner, Peggy York, and I, and she should certainly be up here. She retired as a deputy chief. She was the first female deputy chief. And she got her master's from USC.
yes.
All right.
Anyway. Yes. But for a short time, which was never publicly admitted, but Peggy and I had the highest homicide clearance rate in the city, which was certainly not well received. But the point is, I think, to listen to what people are saying, be willing to listen and hear them. I mean, you can listen to them, but you can't hear them always. And this is something I think that if you're fortunate enough to have a good partner, you have good training, you have good supervision, and you have good experience. And I think that it may take a while, it may not, but I think that it's just vital that you listen to people and you be willing to hear them. And as Alma says, you get them probably at their worst time. If you'd gotten them 10, 15 minutes before, maybe this would never have happened, or 10 minutes later. And I think if you realize that and not be willing, like some of the guys used to do, to thump their chest and who's in charge. And that's not always true.
You know, because we live in an environment where there's a lot of films and movies and people have their perspective of what law enforcement's really like, you three know what it's really like in the locker room, in the field, in the station. There was a study done last year on women in policing, and one of the interesting questions that kept coming up is, what are the negative aspects of policing cultures that need to change for women officers to be better integrated into their departments? Certainly LAPD now leading the country in terms of percentage of female to male ratio, but what are some of those policing cultures that still exist, perhaps not here, but other places that you feel come up that need to change?
Oh, I want to talk about this one. I think we've talked about it. Rumors, filling in the blanks. People will Your resume will arrive anywhere before you do, most of it being hopefully true, but there are people that will consistently fill in the blanks as to who you are. And women in policing are faced with that, I think, at a bigger stake. And so I noticed that working for the Los Angeles Police Department, that it was not only difficult to get the assignment, but then once you got to the assignment, I was told I had to prove myself every time.
So my assignment in SWAT was just over 10 years. I was the first woman in LAPD SWAT, and unfortunately, I'm still the only. And so until we change that, I tried to hold that position. I felt like I was holding that place as long as I could, waiting for my replacement. And unfortunately, she never came, and we're still waiting. And I think there are people that would be perfectly content leaving it as is. And, you know, I would just be this kind of dot on the radar. But I know that my replacement is out there somewhere. And maybe there's 2, maybe there's 3. So I think other aspects of the LAPD, you have a woman pretty much in every assignment throughout the department. And until I think we are represented, one woman is really not diversity in an assignment. And until we can fill those roles, at least to match the percentage of those of us that are on the department, I think it's just going to be a struggle. I think we need the help of our male counterparts to support us and lift us up. And when they hear the voices, I mean, I had 10 years in SWAT, and patrol officers with 5 minutes on the job would ask my male partners, well, how is she? And nobody would ever ask that to me about my male counterparts. And so it's going to take men standing up and saying, what are you talking about? You know, she's perfectly capable, otherwise she wouldn't be here. It's going to be an uphill battle. I think we have a ways to go. I don't know that we'll ever be fully represented to reflect the demographics of the city. But we can just continue to push and support each other and lift each other up. And again, I truly believe that we need our male partners to be our biggest champions, because let's face it, they're, you know, the majority of the department.
Well, and I think one thing that happens, and I've been gone for 30 years, so I'm not sure that I'm really aware of what's going on right now. But one thing that has to happen, and the two of you know this, is you've got to have male supervisors who are willing to select you. And at the time Peggy and I worked together, it was a problem. And we had a loanee from Metro who is probably maybe well known to you guys, but I would broadcast, and he'd take the mic out of my hand and say it again. And it's just, and you always have to work on your reputation. You always do. And it always precedes you, as they say, and it's not always wonderful. But you expect that, and you do have to work much harder. You have to pay attention all the time, and just, you know, be glad that you're there and do the best job that you can do, because in some cases, you are the first woman there, and you just want to be sure that other women come. But we've also got to have supervisors who are willing to select you.
So again, I want to reflect on what Jen said. You know, I also used to find it frustrating when some departments, when you'd ask them why they default to their fitness issue, and I would say, well, you know, I go to the California Police Olympics every year. That's the third largest gathering of amateur athletes in the world, behind the Olympics and the Pan Am Games. I see women taking gold and silver medals in all kinds of events. I know you can teach them how to shoot, so what's the problem? And I never got a straight answer, and that was always frustrating. So I'm so glad that you and all of you have done what you've done. But I want to, before I open this up to the audience for questions, I got one more for you, because despite the fact that I'm very lucky, I get students that walk in my office all the time and they want to go into law enforcement after they get their master's degrees, and that makes me really happy. But how can we make the profession more enticing and more attractive to women today? Given all the things you said about safety and things that happen inside the station and things that people see in the movies, what kinds of things do you think we can do to make it more attractive as a profession?
Well, as I just said a little while ago, I think just making women very well aware of the options that are available to them. It's not just working patrol. That's certainly part of it. It's a vital part of it. I think that you get the basis for the rest of your career if you've got patrol experience. You learn just myriads of things which you were not always able to articulate until maybe years later you thought, oh my God, yeah, I learned that, and that's vital. But just the options that are available to you, the opportunities, the experiences that you have, which will still be in your heart after all these years, and also certainly the service aspect of it.
If we share our experiences as women in law enforcement in a variety of assignments, I think we can encourage other women to apply. And what I tell young people that I encounter that are considering a career in law enforcement is this is really the only job where you will, it's like instant gratification all night long. I mean, it's just amazing that you can show up to a family dispute or the scene of a robbery or a carjacking or whatever the case is and have the ability to have an impact on a person's life during their worst day. And there's something about that. If you're the kind of person that likes to solve problems and to help others, I just don't know that there's a better career option for you. Maybe the fire department, I don't know. But it's just, I can't think of anything I'd rather do. I'd like to make a little more money, but I just don't know. I can't think of another career where I would be as deeply satisfied as I am interacting with the community, making a difference. I look at every interaction that I have with members of the community, let's say in Watts, where I'm now assigned, as an opportunity to change their minds about the LAPD. Every interaction I have, even if it's just fleeting, that's a chance to change somebody's mind. And to me, that's what it's all about. And I think the more that we do that and the more that we tell our stories, the more attractive our profession will be to women.
I'm going to mention some names in the room because I think it's important, but I have Maribel and Carmen and Kathy and some other people that they are really the spirit of enticing people to come into law enforcement, is watching every single time how they devote their heart and their compassion to the people they serve will be probably our biggest recruiter, and obviously the ladies that are up here. The reality of it, and I'll echo what Jen says, is that there's a fire in your heart that you shouldn't let anyone put out. And when you have that fire of serving and helping people, don't let anyone change that, because some people will question why you do it, and they'll say, oh, she's doing it because she's trying to get to the next level. Well, the next level is here. It's always here, every day, is fulfilling your heart. And so don't lose that. Entice more people to join law enforcement, because it really is about giving.
You've talked about the satisfaction you get from being a police officer and the obstacles that stand in your way. So tell me, not just a woman's vision, although it might be a woman's vision, what is your vision for LAPD in the next, let's say, 20 years? Where should the department go? What does it need to do? Both for women, but also.
We need a female chief. I'm just going to say it. That was my answer.
Okay.
So first, I'd like just to introduce newly retired Professor Terry Cooper.
Yes.
He's an ethics professor with a lot of wonderful personal experiences that I found just like amazing. But anyways, so I think the department's answer to that question would be we need our police force to reflect the demographic of our citizens. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I can't imagine what it would feel like being an African American 30 years ago in South Central, and every time the police responded, it was 2 white guys or 4 white guys. So I think as we move in that direction to do a better job reflecting the people that we serve, I think that's not only the department's vision, but that's my vision. And I think we owe that to the people in the communities that we serve, that we reflect them. And I think it'll be easier for them to relate to us and vice versa. So that's kind of my vision. Of course, I would love a world where officers didn't have to use force, but that's not realistic. I would love a world where people would not break the law and do what we tell them, but that's not realistic. But I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think continued training and this recognition that we have made some mistakes and we have a lot of work to do, which I think we've recognized. I think all those things will be helpful as we move forward into the future. And so I think that's not necessarily just a woman's view, but I think men and women in law enforcement in general.
Oh, very well put, both of you. But I think also just the community recognizing what we do and why we do it and the way we do it. And I think what we absolutely need to do is sometimes, and this is not a good word, but just calm down. And it's going to take a long time. We're not going to get this done by the year 2030. It's going to be an ongoing process. And I think what has happened since I retired in 1992, and we have a lot of the same issues, but I think that we are recognizing them, we are attempting to do something about them, and I think the officers, from what I can tell, are much more willing to, I don't know what a good word is, but to maybe change their way and maybe their thinking. And of course, we're getting a different type of officer on than we got on in 1968, 1970. I think people are more aware from maybe social media or whatever you would want to call it, versus just life experience and the way the department views what the job is. And I think that it's going to take a while, but I think that we are absolutely going in the right direction, and we are committed. I say we, but we are committed to making those changes. And I think the officers are much more willing. And I listened to you two guys, and it's so gratifying to me. And you're so much more experienced, and your points of view are just so much better than I ever heard when I was working. And it's very gratifying to me.
So, actually, I just thought of something that I think is really important that I add to that question. So, there was a time, actually early on in my career, where there was really no value placed on higher education. And it wasn't seen as germane or relevant to what we do in law enforcement. And I think the LAPD especially has now pushed this idea that to promote, or in some cases be hired by other smaller agencies, that you need a degree. And when I came back to school to get my master's, I had a lot of my peers say, gosh, what's it going to be like to be around all those liberals and this, that, and the other? And how can you handle that? These people that don't know what it's like out in the real world. And what I told them, I says, first of all, it's amazing. It's amazing to be around people that think differently than I do. Even though cops, we all come from different walks of life. Once we become cops, we all think the same. We put on these goggles, and it's whatever the opposite of rose-colored glasses are, and that's how we view the world. And what coming back to school allowed me to do was to listen to people that had different ideas, different experiences, and it kind of like opened my mind, and it gave me perspective that I think I had lost being entrenched in the LAPD for as long as I have. And so my department just recently approved a pay incentive for the equivalent of an AA, and then a little more money for a BA, or a BS. So we've done some college fairs, and young officers that maybe only have a high school diploma or haven't completed their degree, they're excited about going back to school. And it doesn't matter what your degree is in, it's the idea that you're able to critically think about problems or situations. And so part of my vision is, and I think it's coming into reality now with this push for higher education, is that we stop and we listen to people that are different than us, and we can disagree, but we should still be able to have a conversation. And I think, universities and learning institutions allow us to do that, whereas for a long time we kind of got stuck. So I think that also will help us evolve or continue to evolve.
And it's certainly no surprise that Jen got an A in my class. So let me just say this. I've got a couple of things I want to mention before we close. I want you all first to join me in thanking Helen Kidder, Jennifer Grasso, Alma Burke for their contributions to this city, to their department, and basically to the future. So thank you.
Thanks,
Next, I'd like to thank Eleanor Blake. And again, this is really a tribute to our university. Eleanor produced this film as a master's thesis project. So,
Stand up, Eleanor.
and so last but not least, thank you all for coming out today. You're all very busy people. We try to we always try, Jesse especially puts all of these incredible events together. We try to engage the community in ways that help make you better educated and more aware about certain things. I agree with Helen. If you haven't been out there and you're not in the public safety domain, go on a ride along. Believe me, it'll change your perspective about how easy or hard this job really is. I did a lot of ride-alongs when I was working as an officer, and people after about 90 minutes would say, I don't know how you do this every day. And it really gives you a different perspective. So having said that, and today we've talked about women and glass ceilings and going forward and pioneering. Next month during Black History Month, we're going to put on the thin line between black and blue. I'm bringing 4 chiefs to USC. Chief Brackney's in Charlottesville. She's there, of course, coming off the heels of last week's gun rally there. And of course, 3 years ago with the Unite the Right rally, Mayor James T. Butts, who was chief in Santa Monica for 15 years before he became the executive director at the Los Angeles International Airport, and then now is the mayor. And I was on the phone with him yesterday going through a whole long list of events that the new stadium is going to host, starting with the Super Bowl in 2022. And Chief French, who's in Richmond, California, will be joining us, as well as, of course, our own Chief John Thomas here. We'll be talking about the challenges that they faced in becoming chiefs of agencies as an African American. More importantly, how they see the future of those agencies and what kinds of improvements they were able to make, because, as I always say, you can't change the castle from outside the moat. And these people got inside the moat and they became king of the castle. So we'll learn how it happened. Thank you all for coming today. Have a safe trip home. Really appreciate it.